Life is like a GPS. You can't get there until you set a destination. And once you set that destination, your GPS is going to be twists and turns and roadblocks. But guess what happens? You always get back on track to that destination.
This is a journey.
Let me take you on a journey.
There will still be the journey.
The journey.
New sheriff in town, and his name is
The journey.
Journey.
This thing is bigger than Nino Brown. This is the journey.
The journey.
What is it that moved you?
The journey. The journey. The journey. The journey.
The Journey Initiative is generously supported by Nike's Black Community Commitment.
Welcome back to another episode of The Journey. I'm your host, Larry Robinson, and today we have a Memphis icon that the brother not only is a bad brother, but he's a sharp-dressed man, always, 100% of the time. But before we get to that, and before we get to him, we have a quote. And the quote comes from the great James Baldwin, 20th century poet, novelist, playwright, activist. If you know whence you came, there is no limit to where you can go. Literally, that means if you know where you're from, there's no telling where you can go. There's no telling the heights you can reach. So today we have a brother who has ascended from Jackson, Tennessee, born, but he's been Memphis matured. Member of the greatest fraternity in the world, Kappa Alpha Psi, natural leader, education advocate, business executive, and an absolute visionary. I'm speaking to none other than my brother, Donald Comer. Donald.
Good to see you.
Man, good seeing
Thanks
you,
for
man.
having me.
Oh, man, we are grateful to have you. So we're going to start at the beginning. We're going to start all the way at the beginning. Tell me about the early years in Jackson, Tennessee.
Jackson, Tennessee. Well, the early years, I grew up in a family. Got two brothers and two sisters.
Older or younger?
I have an older brother and two younger sisters and a younger brother. So I'm that semi-middle child. You know, that child that has no special designation. You know, I'm not the oldest.
Yeah.
I'm not the youngest.
Okay.
I'm not the oldest boy.
Yeah. Well, they say you getting out of trouble though.
That was probably true because because these hazel eyes, I always call that little bad green-eyed boy.
Oh,
because
wow.
I was curious,
Uh-huh.
and that has served me well. I still think I'm curious, and
Right.
and it forces me to think critically and to always try to see what's next. And so, you know, as I sit here and I think about it, you know, some of that upbringing definitely contributed to who I am. And each time I have a conversation like this, I learn more about me and what that really means. So yeah, that's what I did. I attended public schools.
Okay.
I went 1 through 6 in a predominantly white school.
Okay.
Did my first year of junior high or middle school in a white school, and then I flipped the script and went to a rural all-black high school.
Really?
And really was a totally different experience as I matured into that, and I ran into teachers who was always curious as to why I was different, and you know how they say that your younger years are your formative years and how impactful they were.
Right.
So that was the first time I really kind of heard some of that, because I had a bit of a different path than the people that I went to high school with, because they'd all gone from elementary school to high school together, and so they had all followed that same path. So mine was just a wee bit different, and I spent a lot of summers with my grandparents who were truly rural. My grandfather was a factory worker. He worked for
Well, hold on, we're gonna get into detail.
Okay,
but,
sure.
But I want to know, who outside your parents and your grandparents, since you brought up your grandparents, who outside your parents and your grandparents had the biggest impact on a young Donald?
Wow, biggest impact on a young Donald. It's hard for me beyond my grandfather to say who that was, but I've had a lot of time to just reflect back along my career path, and that's just been a ton of people.
Okay.
And you say you're going to talk a little bit more about it, so I won't get ahead of myself.
Okay.
But I don't know that there's just one person that I can point to beyond my grandfather in the early years. But a lot of people have been there along the way, helping to create a vision for me and helping me to sometimes see potential that I wasn't able to see for myself.
When you think of your grandfather, what's the one predominant thought that just sticks there?
He was generous. and I still hear stories of people. He never went, he went to high school, didn't finish, didn't go to college, but I still hear of people who have successful careers that talk about the impact that he had and how he showed up in places where there was a need and was willing to, do whatever it took to invest in other people and to pour into others. And even now that he's gone, there's still people when I go home and I say that Oliver Womack was my grandfather, they know of him or they have their own personal stories about how he had an impact.
Oliver Womack.
Oliver Womack.
Wow, okay. Yeah. What decision did you make, Donald, as a young person that ended up having a lifelong impact, even though you might not have known it at the time?
The one that my mom, as recent as this week, reminds me of is the decision that I was going to go to college. I told you that my grandparents lived in the rural area, so as a kid, when I'd go visit them, I had to chop cotton. I had to pick peas. I had to pick cotton, and if anybody's ever picked cotton knows that you can pick all day and still don't get 100 pounds. Right. And they probably was paying $2 a pound.
So Donald, you actually picked cotton?
I actually picked cotton.
Wow.
I actually was out there dragging that bag down a row of cotton and sweating and hot and doing all that stuff. So that instilled on me that was not the life that I was going to live.
So when I moved to Memphis, quick story, I was driving in the Arkansas side and there was a big cotton field. And it was about 95 degrees outside. I said, I should never complain about anything. So I got out there and I cut a branch of that cotton off. And today it sits in my office. No matter how bad the day gets, it's never going to be that, because there's no shade in a cotton field. Shade. And you carrying that burlap bag, so you know what hard work is.
It is hard work, and it's funny when you get midway down that row of cotton, and it's just as easy to finish picking to get to the end as to go back. You reach a point of no return. So, and then you wrap up your day and you come back and everybody's weighing how much cotton they picked. Wow. And there's this point where everybody's at least trying to get 100 pounds, and it's disappointing.
Right.
When you've been there all day and you didn't get 100 pounds. Wow. So it's interesting.
What did you dream as a kid? What was your dreams that you would grow up to be?
My first career aspiration was to be an attorney.
Okay.
I thought that
I can see that.
Yeah, it just felt right. That's that TV image of what's possible more than what I had passion about. But as a first generation college student, there wasn't a lot of conversation around the house about going to college and what you're going to be. There was certainly emphasis on getting good grades and staying focused on getting through school, but it was always transactional.
Right.
It wasn't always a transformative conversation about what you could be. So I had to take my cues often from people that were not living in the same house as I was in.
Okay. When did you know you was going to be okay?
When did I know I was going to be okay?
When you could look in the mirror and say, I can do this thing called life.
I always had a good degree of self-confidence.
Okay.
I always was up for the challenge, and I always felt like I did my best and would always hit the mark. But I always wanted to not just hit the mark, but exceed the mark. And there were times when I did, and there were times when I didn't. But it was always enough to keep me motivated, to keep me pushing forward. And as I said, God has a way of always putting people in your life who, when you can't see the way, can give you just that little bit of extra to help you to see that there's still an opportunity.
Right. Well, every brother typically has a moment, and the fact that you hung out with your grandfather quite a bit, you chopped and picked cotton, and peas and everything else. When did you realize that you was a black man? Hold on, before you answer that question. Look, we're going to be right back on the journey where Brother Donald's going to tell us when he realized he was a brother. Stay right there. This is The Journey on the KUDZUKIAN Network. We'll be right back.
This is a journey.
Let me take you on a journey.
Success in life is not a straight line. There are twists and turns in everyone's life, and the more you know about their story, the more you'll understand the process. KUDZUKIAN Media Group proudly presents The Journey, a show that features successful black men in Memphis telling their stories of their lives and the ups and downs they've encountered on their ultimate road to success. We believe The Journey will encourage young men and help them see that life is a journey. Watch The Journey, hosted by me, Larry Robinson. Brought to you by the KUDZUKIAN Media Group in partnership with the Delta Boulé. Welcome back. I told you we was gonna bring another Memphis icon that was amazing, and I don't think we've let you down. Today we have Brother Donald Comer, executive, born in Jackson, Tennessee. But before we left, we asked him one thing, and we're gonna get back to that. But I first wanna know, Donald, what's your superpower?
You know, I call myself a dot connector. You know, I think that I can sit in a room and I can hear multiple conversations and multiple people offer opinions, and I can see how I can connect the dots between this conversation, this opportunity, and somebody else who can take advantage of it. Sometimes it's me, and sometimes it's somebody else. But I think that my superpower is being a dot connector.
Okay. When you think of who you are, how would you describe yourself to someone who had no idea anything about Donald?
You know, it's funny because I spend a lot of time at work, in the community, mentoring. And when somebody asks me if they can have some of my time and spend a little time getting to know me and understanding how they might want to navigate their career, one of the first things I tell them, I'm straight up no chasers. So what that means to me is that if you're asking me for input, I'm going to give it to you. And I also then tell them that worry about me when I stop talking. Because when I stop talking, I'm no longer invested. And if I'm offering something, and even if it's critical, know that I'm ready to expend some elbow grease to try to add some value at the end of that conversation. So I'm straight up no chasers, and I'm always ready to invest until I see that there's no return on that investment.
Fantastic. So let's go back to our question. The question was, when did you realize you were a black man?
Yeah, I appreciate a couple minutes to really think about that. You know, I'm not that guy who has that truly defining moment of realizing that I was a black man. I think I've lived a life full of microaggressions, where there were lots of subtle moments where I had to stop and pause and say, why did that happen? Especially when I look around the room and I'm the only black man in the room.
Does that happen often? That
happens really often. You know, I'm fortunate the position that I have has afforded me a lifestyle that I probably at 10, 11, 12, 20, 25 couldn't imagine, but it also comes at a price. I sit in boardrooms with senior leadership, and I look around the room and I'm the only black man in the room. I think I have opinions and thoughts and insights that are valuable, but I have to navigate those waters very carefully because of who I am and what those microaggressions might be subsequent to that. I've seen a career where I get a lot of the hard projects. I get those projects that are difficult, that have had challenges, but there's always the expectation that I can navigate those, but they come at a cost. Because I work in a very collegial environment, and when you've come to a bump in the road and it's necessary to put a little extra behind it to just get over that bump, it's hard being collegial sometimes.
I bet.
In order to be able to make the kinds of results happen that are expected of you. And so, I know that, I'm considered to be rigid. And thank goodness I've had some opportunities to do personality assessments and other things that give me deep insights in myself. So I like to consider myself being very, very aware of who I am. And I choose environments where I engage because I know that those environments are the ones where I can flourish and where I can bring my best and where I can make the most contributions. They say that a career is punctuated by 3 phases. It's the learning, the earning, and the returning. I'm in that returning phase, and at 63, I'm probably that guy. I tell you, I was straight up, no chasers. The other part of it is there's some times when I'm unfiltered.
Right.
And so that's where I am.
I find that as I get older, I get less and less filtered. People here at the office, I'm sure, will be like, man, that boy's crazy.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
So, what's some of your early memories, man? Early memories of school?
Oh, man, my earliest memory, and I was talking to somebody about this the other day, was September 1978.
Ooh.
That was my freshman year on college, and I got on campus, and we were in freshman studies. Nobody there but freshmen.
Okay.
And I have friends from that very first week on college that I still rely on. One of my closest friends is my fraternity brother, Bruce Lark. And I love that relationship because no matter how long it is between times that we talk, we pick right up where we were. And there's minimal expectations in the interim around what I should be doing or what I didn't do.
Right.
It's just that unconditional kind of bond. And you mentioned earlier Mo Kappa. That's to me was the essence of Kappa. He wasn't my line brother.
Right.
He was 2 lines ahead of me.
Oh wow.
But he's the one that when I speak of that true bond in Kappa, he's the one that does it for me in terms of relationship. We talk about his family. I talk about my family. We talk about work. We get caught up and we good until the next time we catch up with each other.
Is there such thing for you as work-life balance?
I don't know that there is such a thing. I think that we all choose to do those things and we prioritize those things that are important. So right now I sit on the board of 2 HBCUs. I have a full-time gig at home. I try to let the people that I care about know that I care about them, so I allocate some time for them. And I'm a student working on a PhD.
Oh, PhD.
So all of that is who I am. And I think about how many times I get to a point where I feel like I'm overwhelmed. Then I reach the goal that I had set for myself. And then I say, wow, I can't wait. And like right now, I can't wait until I complete this PhD. But I know because of who I am, I'll be doing something else.
Right.
And I'll get to that point of being overwhelmed. So it's not work-life balance. It's about having a clear sense of priorities and investing and pouring your all into those things that give you strength, that create endurance, and that allow you to follow your passion.
Most people I've talked to have that day from hell, that day that if you could literally turn back the clock, you'd probably go and then skip over that day. What was that day in Donald's life?
I'm going to flip that question just a little bit. I don't, there's not one that really comes out, but I've been working with a career coach because I'm trying to figure out, I'm at an inflection point and I'm trying to figure out next. And one of the exercises she gave me was to give her 3 peaks and give her 3 valleys in my career. And they needed to be on a continuum and they needed to be sequenced according to where they were.
Right.
So when I look back at that, I worked hard in college and I was an accounting major and I got to the end of that and I knew where I wanted to be. My first job was here in Memphis. It was in 100 North Main building working for Banks, Philly and White. I was working for an all-black firm and I was disappointed, not because the job wasn't good and the experience wasn't right, but the pay was substantially below what I thought I should be earning and what other people with the same degree I had gotten from college were earning.
Right.
So that was the peak.
Okay.
At that point. And then I looked at, the valley. Then I looked at the peak was when I got to FedEx and I connected with this lady named Lori Tucker. And I talked about people who see something in me that I hadn't quite seen in myself.
Right.
she was my impetus at FedEx for driving my career, helping me to think through things. And, one of the things she told me is, I tell you, I'm straight up, no chaser. She said, you got to walk in a room sometime and you got to connect with people on an emotional level. You got to tell them how they're going to feel about the work after it's done, and not always jump right in and start telling them about the mechanics of the work, or telling them what, how you went left and how you had to go right to get the work done. So that was my peak following the valley that I went through. And what I came to recognize when I looked at those, remember she said, give me 3 peaks and give me 3 valleys, and put them on a continuum sequentially.
Right.
That for everything that I had identified that was a valley, on the other side of it was a peak. And the lesson I learned as I looked at that, I'd heard the story, said, there's all, behind every valley there's another hill to climb, another opportunity to see. And that was what my life looked like when I looked at my peaks and my valleys and how they informed my career. So, that was an amazing revelation. So I know I've had some down times, and none that just were so daunting that I didn't feel that I could get back up. So I won't say that I've had just that one defining failure, but what I will say is I had many opportunities to get back up.
Now, you're from Jackson, Tennessee.
From Jackson, Tennessee.
And I'm sure Memphis had always been the big city, so to speak, for most. What has Memphis meant to you? I mentioned earlier that it matured. You matured in Memphis.
Yeah.
What has Memphis given Donald that you can point to?
If you talk to anybody who has transitioned or come to Memphis, they always tell you that it's hard to become a Memphis insider.
Right.
What Memphis has done is I've always had this unique opportunity to be on the inside. When I went to UT Martin, during my era, most of the people that went to Martin were from Memphis.
Right.
So when I got to Memphis was immediately home, and it's been more home to me than Jackson ever was. Again, because I was an adult.
Right.
So I've had some amazing opportunities. My entire career has been here in Memphis, and so I've worked for Brandon Smith and Jones. I worked for Holiday Inns when they were on Lamar, and everybody wanted to work at that building with all the flags in front of it. And I went from there, and I was part of the team that transitioned International Paper from New York City into Memphis. So I've had that great opportunity.
Right.
And then the flagship corporation for Memphis, FedEx, I've spent the last 34 years of my career, being a part of that journey. And it's exciting as they look at 50 years to think that, I've been there more than two-thirds of the time that FedEx has been here. And I have memories of significant contributions to what is now a bellwether predictor of the economy, not just for Memphis or the United States, but for the world. So it's been a great ride, and all that's been because I've been a part of Memphis, and just the great people, the friends that I've made, the connections, and there's not too far that I can go and I don't run into somebody that I don't know, and actually have a real connection to them.
Right. Talking about your younger self, is there anything you'd do over again?
There's not a single thing that I can say that I would do over. In the moment, I would probably have thought, man, that was a missed opportunity.
Okay.
Or that if I could have done it differently, it would have been better. But, everything seemed to have worked out for the good. And so I would not go back and do a do-over on anything. Maybe I would have worked just a little bit harder. Or I would have spent more time bringing somebody along with me. But I wouldn't do a complete do-over on anything that's been in my life.
So you gave the 3 stages of your career. Was it earning? Or was learning, earning, and returning?
Yes.
I'm assuming you're into the return phase.
Yeah, I'm right there on the bubble. I'm still doing a little bit of earning, but to the extent that I can blend the two and make the two work together, And if I had to choose, I'd be on the returning side.
The PhD. What is that for? What is that part of the returning?
It is. It is part of a strategy.
Okay.
Maybe it's a loosely knitted strategy, but it's part of a strategy. I told you that I sit on the board of 2 HBCUs, and HBCUs and education of people who look like me is a passion that I have.
Right.
And what I found is that higher education has a keen appreciation for that terminal degree.
Right.
So there are times when you want to contribute to the conversation, especially when you're talking about the academy, as they like to call it, where your opinions are discounted. So just like when I was in corporate America and I couldn't get promoted because I didn't have a master's, I said I could remedy that. So I went back to school, and I'm working on that PhD, and it's been a tremendous learning journey, and I have new insights. A great ability to contribute. And I also learned that the design of higher education and this premise of shared governance and academic freedom creates a degree of chaos.
Right.
But it's a chaos that's been working well for well over 100 years. So I just needed to understand more about how it worked so I can continue to contribute and increase my levels of contributions. Aspirations is to be in some level of administration within a historically black college, touching lives and making a contribution.
Returning,
yeah.
All right, we coming to the end. So we, I want to go back to Jackson. Saturday morning, you're sitting there, young Donald, sitting there watching television, favorite cartoons, whatever his favorite programming in, eating a favorite bowl of cereal. Young Donald looks up, and Donald of today is standing in the doorway. What would Donald of today say to Donald of yesterday?
What I would say is the same thing I tell anybody else, is to master the art of the long view. And what that means is set goals for yourself. You know, be clear about that. I always knew I kind of wanted to do well and that what kind of life, but I never set a goal. One of my good friends, Chris Winton, says in his book, C4, life is like a GPS. You can't get there till you set a destination.
Ooh.
And so
say that one more time, please.
Life is like a GPS. You can't get there until you set a destination. And once you set that destination, your GPS is going to be twists and turns and roadblocks. But guess what happens? You always get back on track to that destination until you set another one.
Right.
So that's always the conversation. So if you ask to talk to me about mentoring, I'm going to ask you, where are we trying to go? And then in the subsequent conversations, when you're sharing something with me, if it doesn't quite sound to me that it's getting you to that same destination, I'm going to ask you, you know, are you comfortable that it's going to get you there? Or did you make a decision to change the destination? So let's get us both on the same path so we can do that. If I could have told myself that that's how I would have operated life, now do I know that it would have gotten me any further given the era that I grew up in?
Right.
But in the era that we're in now where there is ubiquitous access to information, you need to set a destination and then you need to make a plan to get there.
Fantastic. Well, listen, this is the last question. And it's not really a question. It's you making a statement. There's many young men sitting here listening or watching you right now. Please leave them with a Comerism, something that they can point back to from this conversation.
The last thing that I would share is there's no such thing as a failure. When you fall down, it's just another opportunity to get up. If you believe in yourself, and you trust that there's something bigger than you to guide you, you'll always be a winner. And in this infinite game that we call life, always stay focused on getting better and being your best self.
Set your GPS. Set your GPS. Because you can't get there until you set that destination. And that's what I got today from Brother Donald Comer. Listen, this is the journey. And I want to thank our guests.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing your journey,
Appreciate
Donald. Listen, I told you we're going to keep bringing them. So Till the next time, I'm your host, Larry Robinson, and this has been The Journey on the KUDZUKIAN Network. Take care.
Thank you to our partners at Nike's Black Community Commitment. To hear more incredible stories like this, be sure to download the KUDZUKIAN app from the App Store or Google Play. Or check out the Journey Memphis podcast on all your major podcast providers. Also, check us out on the KUDZUKIAN Network.